If you are a widow or a widower, God has a plan for you, just like he has a plan for everyone else. And so today you might be sitting here like, I'm not married. I've never been married. I'm married. I'm not a widow. But God's word will still speak to you here today, because his plan for widows is very close to what his plan for everyone else is. First thing we're going to look at is the biblical plan for widows, the biblical plan. In Luke 2:36-37, we see that there was a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel, the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years and had lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then as a widow to the age of 84. The reading of this demonstrates that she was married for 7 years. She was married for 7 years. She was at the age of 84, and so for many, many years, she did not get remarried, that she spent her time as a widow. But that time was well spent. That time was well spent serving the Lord and following his plan. You know, God is a God of plans. He has a lot of plans, and his plans are perfect. But did you know that God initially planned to use wasps to pollinate flowers? Did you know this? But in the end, he went with plan B. There it is, yeah. Taking a little bit. God has a plan for widows. If you are a widow or a widower, God has a plan for you, just like he has a plan for everyone else. And so today you might be sitting here like, I'm not married. I've never been married. I'm married. I'm not a widow. But God's word will still speak to you here today, because his plan for widows is very close to what his plan for everyone else is. And so Paul talks about this plan for widows in 1 Timothy 5:3-4 and verse 8. It says this: honor widows who are widows indeed. Honor means value. It doesn't just mean, oh, think well of them or like say hi to them, be nice to them. No, honor here in the Greek, it means to value them. And it's so countercultural to the time that Paul is writing, because Christian love was first directed at orphans and widows. That is those are the people that needed to be taken care of. We see there's an argument that broke out in the book of Acts early on in the church, is who is going to take care of the widows. There were people that their hands were laid on them so that they would have this ministry to take care of the widows. Paul says, value the widows who are widows indeed. What does that mean? Widows indeed. It says, but if any widow has children or grandchildren, they must first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family and to make some return to their parents. The question here is, who's they? Is it the widow? No, it's the children and the grandchildren. As we read this verse, we see that Paul is speaking not to widows at the moment, but he's speaking to the children and the grandchildren of the widows. Hey, take care of your family. Take care of your family. Your mother, your grandmother who lost her husband, take care of them, because they're in distress, they're in need, and specifically in this time, they weren't working as much as men could work. They weren't bringing home the bacon in a sense. They may have been actually really old and frail. They needed to be taken care of. Is it a burden? Yes, it's a burden. Life is full of burdens. We don't look at people as burdens, but it still can be burdensome. There's this struggle. There's this, all right, well, my resources now have to go to help. I wasn't planning on it, but now my resources have to go and help my ailing mother, my ailing father, someone who is in desperate need. This is what life is, that we take care of each other. People come together and get married and have kids, and you take care of the kids, and then kids, one day you're going to have to take care of your mother and your father. That is how the Bible proposes it and demonstrates it. It says to value them. Teens, especially teens, do you value your parents? Do you value the people who have given you life and have cared for you so dearly? The Bible says to make some return to their parents, for this is acceptable in the sight of God. Going on, it says, but if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for his old household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Paul pulls no punches in talking about how serious providing for your own is. He says, if you neglect your own household, if you neglect them, if you don't provide for them, You've denied your faith. You have denied the faith, and you are worse than an unbeliever. Paul is serious. The Bible is serious. God is serious about taking care of the people around you, especially your own household. I know that in America, we've been privileged with the fact that we can have a retirement. But that's the exception, not the rule, when we look at human history. That people would work until they were literally unable to work any longer. We're blessed that we can have a retirement. But yet that's the exception and not the rule. We need to make sure that the people in our lives, especially our parents and those who are older than us, are well taken care of. It is acceptable in the sight of God. In 1 Timothy 5:16, it says, if any woman who is a believer has dependent widows, she must assist them, and the church must not be burdened, so that it may assist those who are widows indeed. This woman, who is Paul speaking of? A woman who's a believer and has dependent widows. It would be a woman who had maybe a daughter-in-law or a granddaughter-in-law or her own daughter who lost a husband, that this woman who was not a widow yet, that still had a husband, that still had funds, was supposed to help the ones below with their needs. The Bible is about help. It's about involving ourselves in each other's lives and making sure that our needs are taken care of. That is what the Bible is about. That is what God's about, that we look to the people who are in most need, the people who are hurting the most, and we take care of them as God has taken care of us. Notice once again, though, it says that the church may not be burdened, but it may assist those who are widows indeed. Once again, the widows indeed. In 1 Timothy 5:11 through 15, Paul says this, but refuse to put younger widows on the list. For when they feel sensual desires and disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation because they have set aside their previous pledge. Paul is not saying here that it is a sin to get remarried. He's saying that it is a sin to say, you know what, I'm just going to live for God. I'm just going to serve his church. I'm not going to have another family. This is what I'm going to do. But then they have these feelings, and these feelings are fine, but then they disregard Christ and this pledge that they've already made to God, that they were just going to serve him wholeheartedly, and they go and they get remarried. They had taken a vow, in a sense, and then they broke that vow, the vow to Christ, to just serve him for the rest of their life. It goes on, it says, at the same time, they learn to be idle as they go around from house to house, and not merely idle, but also gossips and busybodies, talking about things not proper to mention. Therefore, I want younger widows to get married, bear children, keep house, and give the enemy no occasion for reproach, which means abuse or reviling, for some have already turned aside to follow Satan. What is Paul communicating here? He is not communicating that women have to just stay in the house and keep house and just raise children. That is not what he's saying. But back then, that was a very viable option. What he's really communicating is don't be idle, don't be a busybody, to stay active. We can see that where he says, giving the enemy no occasion for reproach. He doesn't want reproach. He doesn't want the enemy to have any reason to abuse you, to abuse the church, to revile the church, to demonstrate, oh, look at these Christian women who are just going house to house and gossiping and starting rumors. He doesn't want that. He wants you to be working. And we see this principle in the Old Testament. When did David fall with Bathsheba? When he was idle. When his army was waging war and he was at home doing nothing. That's when sin came in. That's when temptation came, and that's when he fell. This is the same thing that he is speaking of, Paul is speaking of. Don't be idle. Be working. Be busy. Be busy for your family. Be busy for the Lord, giving the enemy no occasion for reproach. And so a question I have for us today, the first one is, have I given the enemy an occasion for reproach? Have I given the enemy an occasion to cause harm to the church, to allow abuse to be given to the church, for people to revile the church? Have I given the enemy an occasion? Because you don't have to be a widow to do this. You could be a married person, you could be a single person, you could be a teenager, you could be anybody who would give an occasion for reproach. But is that you? Is that you? Have you given an occasion for reproach?